Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Daniel Roman here for winteriscoming.net. And today I am so excited to welcome John Lunn and Eivør. John and Eivør, along with composer Danny Saul, created the music for Netflix and the BBC's TV series The Last Kingdom, as well as the new follow-up film Seven Kings Must Die. And they also have a new album out of music inspired by The Last Kingdom. As of this recording, it's out today, so when you're watching it, it will be out and you should go listen. The Last Kingdom, Destiny is All. Eivør and John, thanks so much for taking the time to stop by and talk about your work today.
No, it's a pleasure. Lovely to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Total pleasure. I'm a huge fan of The Last Kingdom. Love the music on it. So been really looking forward to talking to you both.
Oh, great. Oh, thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So one thing I was curious about, just to kind of establish this right up top for people listening who may not know too much about Destiny is All, it is not a soundtrack album. It is an album of new music that is inspired by the songs from seasons 3, 4, 5, and the show in general. So can you talk a little bit about why you decided to do a companion album instead of a kind of a more standard soundtrack?
John, you start.
Yeah, we kind of started that idea on the first album we did. I mean, I've been doing a lot of TV and film now for about 30 years, and I always find soundtrack albums kind of slightly frustrating. You know, there might be 3 or 4 cues that work really well on their own, and then there's inevitably about another 10 or 12 cues that don't really make much sense without the pictures beside them. And then the fact that Eivør was an artist already in her own right and had her own following, and also the fact that she was a vocalist and we had a singer, which is quite unusual for a lot of soundtracks. And she was also a singer-songwriter herself. It just seemed to make sense that as the material we were working on, it just became more and more obvious that actually we could extend this material and turn it into a proper track and just generally make it a more, immersive, kind of interesting experience for fans. That's really, that's really the decision.
I think.
Sorry, Daniel. I mean, the only thing I would say about that is that there are a couple of things that we might have normally included on a soundtrack album, which we haven't, because they just didn't work as turning them into actual tracks.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think the flip side of that is there are some sounds on Destiny is All that might feel pretty new to people who've only watched the show, who maybe haven't listened specifically to the soundtracks.
I can only apologize for that. That's totally my fault.
Well, I did want to ask you both, what was it like to revisit these songs? Because some of them have been around for a while, like Luftstrater is one specifically that comes to mind, where the new version has a lot of differences. So both singing and instrumentation wise, what was it? Did you guys re-record all new tracks for these?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Beloveds, did you do new vocals for? You must have done some new vocals for Beloveds. You did a lot of new vocals.
I did a lot of new vocals on Beloveds, but there is definitely material from the series and from the movie on the soundtrack album that we then have kind of reworked and expanded into more of a longer sequence to kind of give it, in a way, a life on its own, John, right?
Yeah,
kind of... I
mean, that's the idea, really, is that these tracks can exist on their own, without the pictures. And it was a process we started doing on the first album where we were definitely extending the music. And we've really gone a step further here where we have done... I think all the fans would recognize exactly where the inspiration for each track comes from.
Exactly.
But we've taken them in directions that we'd never be able to do in the show itself, or would just be inappropriate. And I hope the fans will forgive us for that. I mean, I think I think it's worthwhile because we have. Well, I've already had a couple of of tweets from people. Why didn't you include such and such and such and such? From the movie, and it's because they didn't really quite work as standalone sort of tracks, really.
Yeah, I'm not too surprised to hear that, but also that's one of the things that to me sets Destiny is all apart from the usual soundtrack album, is how much room you both, and Danny, because I'm assuming Danny was pretty heavily involved in the
Danny's
album as well.
Massive, yeah, absolutely.
It seems like the three of you really had room to try some different things artistically, like you said, that might not work in the show, but that are wonderful for fans to still have a different experience with this as its own separate companion piece. So kind of along those lines, there were electronic elements in The Last Kingdom's music in general, especially in Seven Kings Must Die, but it seems like that got taken to a slightly more pronounced level in the companion album. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that idea of using electronic instruments in a period piece and kind of how that fit together for you guys with things like Eivor, your singing, as well as using more classical instruments like the lyre that made an appearance on the album.
Well, to begin, it's set in the 9th century. Nobody really knows what the music was like then. and anyway, even if we did, it just wouldn't work to be able to tell the level of storytelling that the music's required to do in The Last Kingdom. And I wanted to do something different. Quite a lot of the shows that are kind of, in that same frame, like, Vikings and say maybe Game of Thrones, they all use orchestral elements. And I really wanted to try doing something different. So I suggested that we do it all electronically. But while I was working on it, it became obvious that I was going to need something else.
Yeah.
And Eivor was that something else. And some. And Eivor's like an orchestra in her own right. But there are some tracks on the album, where she's doing the lead, the rhythm, the bass, and all the harmony at the same time. So, sorry, I'm digressing.
No, not at all.
It just seemed the combination just seemed to work because they were all most of the instruments, electronic instruments that we're using, are all analog synths. Kind of slightly, they've got their own little quirks and the tuning's always a bit of a nightmare kind of getting. And there's a sort of real earthy quality to them.
Yeah,
that just really fitted the landscape of The Last Kingdom, and then you put Eivor's voice, on top of that, and I think we created something pretty unique, and stand out. I can't really think of any other film score that's quite like what we've done, and then we added a few, things like the lyre and the cantella, and a few bells and and things and there's quite a bit of percussion, kind of, sort of Nordic primeval percussion going on as well. But when we started working on the album, I just said I don't know if I said this to Eivor, but I didn't probably need to say it. But I said to Danny, I said, listen, anything's possible now.
Yeah,
this is our album, right? Let's just make it sound, the way we want. It doesn't matter if it would have worked on the show itself or not. Let's just make it good. Yeah,
and that's definitely something that makes it a very special release, I think. So this is a question for Eivor. You've both done a lot of different projects, but Eivor, you've done a lot of stuff not in the film realm as well. So like, obviously you have a bunch of albums, I think 9 albums at this point, for your own music. You recently did God of War Ragnarok with Bear McCreary. So I was wondering, how has your work on The Last Kingdom, has it changed how you approach those other projects at all, or maybe vice versa?
Oh, definitely. For me, The Last Kingdom was the first work for film and TV I ever did, actually.
Yeah.
And John flew me over to London, and we did a fun session where we did some experiments with some throat singing and some me screaming on top of his tracks. And
she's talking about the title. She's talking about the title sequence, by the way. It's hardly, it's hardly screaming.
And I mean, that was just such a fun experience altogether. And yeah, like John said, it ended up being the title music that we created at that moment. And by then, I didn't know that I was going to be this much involved in the series, as I then later on became. And it's been going on now for almost 8 years, and it's come to an end. And it's a strange feeling because it's been such a big part of my life the past years. And definitely it has inspired me in also my approach to my own music. Definitely, it's just become kind of a part of my creative inner landscape. So, and this music that John had created for The Last Kingdom just really also resonated within me and kind of brought me back to my roots in a way, in Faroese folk music, which seemed very appropriate to be inspired by in this series. So, it's stuck in my heart now.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine what a journey it has been, because like you said, it's been, 8-ish years at this point that you've both been working on this. So I wanted to ask about kind of the collaborative shorthand you guys have developed, because I did watch a live video, Eivor, that you did of the theme song to The Last Kingdom. And I feel like some people might not know this, but you are, I believe, the only voice in the soundtrack. Is that right? Like, you're doing most of the vocals, or all of the vocals?
All of the vocals.
I think all of them,
yeah. So you can really hear that in the live version, because you're not just doing the higher pitched throat singing, you're also doing lower growls and all these different types of vocalizations. So like, when you guys are working on cutting these tracks, how do you communicate to each other? It needs more of XYZ type of vocalizations. I'm just curious kind of how that communication has evolved throughout the show.
I mean, me and John, during time, me and John have kind of created our own language, haven't we, John?
We have. Yeah. Like when she does, when we need something, in a battle sequence, like it's a bit of like the title sequence, I call that her demented baby style. And then we've just, because Eivør had never done anything to film before, but she picked it up, so quickly. Because of course, one of the difficulties about using a voice within film is that the dialogue you have to be really careful of. And the lyrics to a song can sometimes get in the way. So we had to find a way for Eivør to actually do this without having lyrics. And she's done that brilliantly. I mean, amazingly. I mean, in fact, when I think about how we started out, I'd never in a million years imagined that we'd use so much of voice in the show. But the way that she's developed it means that we've been able to integrate it just as if it's part of the underscore, really. And believe it or not, there are some songs on the album that still have no lyrics at all. I mean, Blues for Halig has no lyrics. That might be the only one. No, I don't. Does Blood Bowl Prevail have any lyrics? Oh, it does at the very, very end.
No. Yeah. No,
I don't think it does. So it's amazing how we think of them as songs, but actually, not all of them have even got any lyrics in them.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most interesting things that I think we've managed to achieve is that the use of the voice, that's separated from lyrics.
Yeah, and it's been a real freedom for me to kind of just be able to work with my voice in the series as part of the instrumentation, like another
because
instrument.
we've never written any of it down.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
I mean, how would you go about writing down what Eivør does? You know, you could be there all day trying to, you know, why not just let her do it? You know, so no, none of it, not a note of it has ever been written down on paper. It's all kind of improvised by us all. Yeah,
that's so cool. I mean, it makes sense because like you said, like trying to think of a piece of sheet music and how you would translate some of these things onto it. It is hard to imagine, but
pointless.
I think that makes it only even cooler and kind of fits thematically with The Last Kingdom, that's exploring this idea of what things have been recorded and what things haven't. So that is very cool. So I did want to ask just a little bit about Seven Kings Must Die specifically. Were there any themes or things that were important for you guys to come back around to here at the end of Uhtred's journey? Was working on the film any different than the show? I'd just be curious to hear a little about your experience on the movie.
Yeah, I don't think it wasn't really that different from any of the previous series. I mean, the last 10 minutes of the show was quite tricky because we could have done it in so many different ways, you know, because there's the end of the battle, and then, you know, there's the
very long battle.
A very long battle, you know. See, it's about a 20-minute sequence. I mean, you know, it's astonishing. But then the last 10, 15 minutes of the show is basically wrapping up all 5 series, you know, and the movie. And, you know, we had so much music that we could have done. And some of the elements do come back, and then towards the end, I mean, Danny Saul, who was working with, came up with this kind of little lyre figure that we based a whole completely new track for the very, very end on it. At one point, I was arguing with him, thinking, no, this is where we need something we've done before. But he was right. We needed to write something completely new, and that's the track that's ended up on the album called Until Valhalla. And then,
oh, cool.
I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen the movie, but, you know, at the very, very end of the movie, the camera pans out to, you know, and you see Banbury Castle as it is to this very day, you know, with a car park and, you know, and kind of visitors and stuff like that. And I'd always, and up until this point, we hadn't used Luftstracker, which is probably our biggest hit. We hadn't used it at all in the entire movie, you know.
Wow.
And I just suddenly thought, so what? So, and then we've been talking about doing a different version of Luftstracker for the album, and then it just suddenly dawned on me that, well, what we do is we do a modern version of Luftstracker, you know, without the lyre, you know, and I did the lyre part on a and it was another synth, but it was a bit more like you know, like a 70s kind of, you know, funk kind of mini moog kind of style, you know, synth version that I did of it, and it's a bit more groovy, and I kind of just had this idea of kind of bringing it up to date somehow. And that was kind of what sort of inspired that one. I mean, we didn't go the whole hog, you know, and have a rhythm section and a you know and a brass section then, but we could, you know, at one point we could have done possibly. But that's well, and then that track became obviously it went on the album like that.
Yes, I was just going to ask. That's the version that is the ending track of the album that just came out today, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the end titles of the movie. Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, if you haven't seen that yet, go watch Seven Kings Must Die so you can know what John is talking about here, because that is a very cool kind of evolution at the very end of the story. Okay, so I know we're running up on time, so I have just a couple more questions. One, and I'd love to hear from both of you about this. At this point, like we've talked about, it has been quite a ride for you working on The Last Kingdom. Looking back on this almost decade-long journey, are there any specific moments or things that are really emblazoned in your mind that when you think back on your time working on The Last Kingdom, these are some of the things you think of?
You go, Eivør.
Wow.
Yeah, we're going with the easy questions here today.
Whoa.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. The show is ending.
I mean, there have been many memorable moments in the process of creating it. I mean, obviously, the most memorable one for me will always be like the first time me and John were in the studio together in London. And then along the way, I mean, just working on some of the scenes has just been sometimes fun, sometimes dramatic, sometimes really emotional also. Yeah. And you get kind of attached to the things that are going on and to the whole story of the series and the music. But I mean, I don't have like any specific scenario in mind right now. Do you, John?
Not really. I mean, there was a point, I'll never forget, there was a point where I knew this was going to work.
Yeah. What was that?
Because there's always this, I'd never met Eivør before, and we were actually introduced as well by some people we kind of, sort of vaguely knew. And I think when we first met Eivør, it was like, it was kind of like one of those meetings where the boyfriend comes round to meet the parents for the first time. I don't know. I won't go any further into it. But I just remember, because it was a big responsibility for me, because I decided to go down this route, and and it was a big series and a lot of money at stake, and there's a lot of people wondering what shape the music was going to be. The music was, for something like this, a period drama like this, the music is massively important, because it gives off the flavor of the landscape. It's so important to it. Yeah. And there was a moment within the 3 days that Eivør and I recorded together in my studio. There was a moment where I just went, right, this is it. And that for me, that was a pivotal moment. Yeah.
Awesome.
In fact, I remember Eivør was doing some singing, and and my sound engineer Paul was there, and we'd done a lot of work together. And without saying anything, he just turned around to me and looked at me and went, and kind of as if to say, "Fuck, this is it."
Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, that's the moment that really stands out for me.
Yeah. Amazing. The magic. When the magic all started coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I have one thing to add also, because it's obviously been a lot of, we work together in a studio a lot, but mostly we've worked together long distance.
Yeah.
So I would get some music from John, and he would give me like some kind of ideas that he has in his mind for the scene. And I would get a lot of freedom to kind of throw in some ideas, and sometimes I would send quite a few ideas over, and you pick.
I mean, and that was really useful.
But then I've also been touring a lot during some of the seasons that we created, and I always had like a microphone, a sound card, and stuff in my backpack. So sometimes John would I need a vocal, and it needs to be done like today. And I'm on the road somewhere, and I'm like, okay, I can do it. I'll find a room somewhere. I'll find a.
I mean, that's
many
that's
vocals
astonishing.
have been recorded crazy places around the world. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, at one point we were going to put, where it was all, where the whole album was going to be recorded, but I think it was going to be, the list was going to be too long. Virtually every hotel somewhere in each capital city of Europe.
Yeah. So I've kept hotels awake in the night doing some battle scenes for John. I can promise you that.
Worth it. That's so cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I have just a couple more very quick questions. So like kind of a lightning round of just a few short ones. So is there any music that either of you has been listening to lately, either in film or just in general, that you've been really enjoying?
I had to grab a quick bite to eat last night, and I was in a restaurant, and they had this, and they were playing a vinyl thing, and it was really interesting music, and it turns out to be this Australian band called Surprise Chef, Which
Okay.
was, and funny enough, I came back home and checked them out again last night, which I thought was, that's really interesting.
Wow, that sounds cool.
Cool.
Yeah, that's the
Check it
immediate
out.
thing that comes to mind.
Amazing. What have I been listening to? Well, I've been checking out a few new releases. Like I listened to Fever Ray's new album lately, and Bjork as well. Both very progressive and alternative albums.
I must listen to. I haven't listened to it. I must listen to it.
Yeah. It's really cool. And then an album trilogy that I've been obsessed with lately is the new Röyksopp Swedish band album, which is very electronic.
Oh, cool.
I've been quite obsessed with that. I've been cranking it up in my speakers lately.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to check that out as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
I think you love it. Very synthy.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, that sounds right in the wheelhouse for the Destiny Is All album. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So now that The Last Kingdom is over, what's next for you both?
I'm going on to do yet another television series, another series of Belgravia, then another series of Shetland, which is kind of like a Scandi noir, and then the following year another Downton Abbey movie. I think looks like it's about to be on the cards.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I'm working on my next solo album, which will be out next year, and so this is a creation year for me, and next year will be all about touring again. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So you don't have to record in hotel rooms right now, is what I'm hearing.
Not right now, no.
Yeah.
No.
For this brief
Sadly,
time.
I'll really miss it, actually.
No, I know. Well, I mean, we're going to have to find something else to work on together.
Definitely, John.
Yeah.
I'll definitely miss your requests on crazy things, crazy vocalizations.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's enjoyed listening to your music for years at this point, I hope that ends up happening too for both of you.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so last question. I am going to put you both on the spot. Imagine, and gear is not a requirement here. Imagine you have to pick a set list of 3 songs from Destiny Is All. Which 3? This is a group question. So which 3 would you guys pick for your set?
Oh, wow. Can I go first?
Yeah.
Yep.
Which 3 would we pick for our set? I would definitely pick. Oh, it's hard to choose 3.
Yeah.
But I would choose Death of Ethelfled, which is one of my favorites.
So beautiful, that song.
Really enjoyed singing that one. And the hymn, probably. And then I really like Blues for Harlig, which is maybe one of the tracks that is quite a little bit outside. It's been in the series, John, but then you created like riff. a new take of it, right?
Yeah, the riff is kind of is from season 2.
Okay.
Yeah, and the melody.
I was curious about this
and
with that song specifically, because I couldn't remember it. So it was in season 2?
Yeah, and in fact, there's a variation of it on the first album. It's called and it's partly my fault. It's misspelt on the album. It's it's H-E-L-I-G, and it should be H-A-L-I-G. It might not have been my spelling, but between I was working on it and the artwork, somehow it got changed. The title got changed, but the riff from that is for Blues for Halig. I always just felt I love that track, but I always felt there was another sort of side to it, and I started experimenting with it, and I took lots of Eivor's vocals and started messing them around, turning them backwards and kind of looping them on each other, and it just kind of came together. Yeah, it just kind of grew. It was and it was the further I wanted to do something which took us as far away from the actual Last Kingdom as possible. And I was seeing how far we could stretch the material and how far we could go. So so I would definitely have Death of Halig, and I would have not Death of Halig, Blues for Halig, and I'd have Death of Ethelfled because it's such a moving track.
Yeah,
and then I think I might go for Forever because that was one of the last tracks that we kind of sorted out.
Yeah,
and
it
kind
is.
of,
Yeah.
and it was always there, kind of, in the background, and I knew there was kind of material in there for it, but I just didn't know how it was working. And then we did a variation of it, and then gave it to Eivør, and Eivør just turned it into something, just magical. And so I'm really pleased with that track, how it's come together, because I don't know how we did it. Kind of, because it just came from almost nothing, into this, kind of surprising track.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
it was
amazing.
one of those nice surprises that just popped up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, so it's funny that is like the surprise track, or a surprise track, because so when I was listening to the album this week to get ready to talk to you both, hearing that song, that was a specific point I really remember perking up and being like, this is different than I expected, because if I remember right, that one starts with an electronic arrangement and then other instruments come in over top of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is very cool. It's definitely a standout moment on the album. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Eivør and John, thank you both so much for taking the time to talk with us today, for all of your incredible work on The Last Kingdom and the new album, Destiny Is All. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for making it easy for us. That was great.
Yeah, that was lovely.
It was my pleasure. And for those of you listening, if you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check us out at winteriscoming.net, where we're writing about science fiction, fantasy, and historical fiction stuff pretty much every day of the week. And in the meantime, don't forget to also check out Seven Kings Must Die, out now on Netflix, and The Last Kingdom Destiny Is All album, which, when you're watching this, is also out. So definitely hit it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.